Thank you all so much for joining in for our first webinar. Hopefully the first of many. We have an absolute cracker for you tonight. So yeah, absolutely enjoy, and I will hand you over to Katie. So thank you so much, Katie, as well. And we're just so looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this first Elevate Her webinar that's going to be focused on aviation management. It's an absolute pleasure to be doing this evening. I'm going to warn you all now, I'm probably going to be a little bit rusty. I haven't taught since May, so it's been a couple of months. And it's been a couple of months. It's been a couple of years since I've done this online. I'm very used to lecturing online, but it's been a while since I have done this. So without further ado, let's get started with this evening. I'm fully aware that for many of us, it's a bit of a warm evening this evening. I know that it's been an absolutely glorious day, but yeah, let's get started. So I just want to get started with a little bit about me. So why am I running this webinar? Who am I, etc. So my name is Katie Bickley. I'm currently a lecturer in aviation management at the University College Birmingham, delivering the University of Warwick aviation and airport management degrees. So I've been in this role for just short of 5 years. I left my previous role just before the pandemic, and it was probably the best timing I think I've ever had in terms of roles. Over my 5 years, I've taught around about 750 students on the aviation and airport management undergraduate programs. So I focus on management. My job title is a lecturer in aviation management. I practice day to day in the area of aviation management. It is a form of business studies for those of you that are kind of curious. We sit within a field of business, and I'm also a business studies lecturer as well sometimes, and I'm sometimes a tourism lecturer, but through and through, my passion is aviation, and that is what Catherine and Maddie and the rest of the Elevate Her team have asked me this evening to come and talk to you guys about. So kind of what are my qualifications apart from being a lecturer? Well, I am also studying a master's degree in aviation management at the moment. When I was choosing university 13 years ago, I didn't know what I wanted to do as a degree, and I didn't actually realise that you could go and study in aviation. I've always been passionate about the industry, but I didn't realise that there was such a thing as being able to do a degree in aviation management. So instead I went off, I studied something else. I haven't used that degree really, apart from to get me into a graduate scheme. The rest of the time I have faced my kind of adult career for the past 10 years within the world of aviation and looking at the business side ultimately of aviation. Just a little kind of touch on the bottom there. I did do both the business placement schemes and the graduate program at British Airways as well. That really helped me kind of launch into the industry as well. And where I kind of tie over with a lot of the stuff that the team are doing at Elevate Her is I used to fly as cabin crew, but I was also the flight planning duty manager. So I was looking after a team of 10 flight planners on shift at BA. And we were pushing out the flight plans for 1,000 flights per shift. So I was responsible for every single one of those flight plans going out globally and looking at whether or not we could operate all of our flights every single day. Now, I'm very used to lecturing. I'm very used to having a group of people in a room like this. My one request to you all, if you have any questions throughout, please use either the chat function or the Q&A function that we've got built into this system today. I would really appreciate if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat box. I will try and answer them, and if I can't answer them today, I will get them back to you, and I will find the answer out, and by tomorrow you will have a response to those questions, because I'll find a way of getting these out to you. So please, if you are curious, if you've got anything that you want to ask, please don't be scared of me. Please just ask away. I like to think that if I don't know, I'll know someone that knows, and I'll be able to go back to the team that I work with up in Birmingham and get that back to you tomorrow if I don't know it today. So that's my kind of plea to you all. Please ask any questions. Please get involved. I say please get involved. The first thing that I'm going to actually do in a second is I'm going to get you all to think about what actually is aviation management in the first place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly gauge and see where we are in the room and see what we all think when it comes to aviation management. So I'm just popping a poll onto the screen. You should be able to see this now. And what I would like you to do is I'd like you to if you go onto menti.com and use the code that's on the screen, which is 59912677, I'd like to see what you think when it comes to aviation management as a term. So I'd like you to think of what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think about aviation management. I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes, probably just about a minute or so, just to pop that into the poll. So if you can please do that for me and have a little bit of a response as to what you think aviation management is at the moment. So yeah, we'll get that done and that'd be great. This is when it gets really awkward because I'm just here by myself. Yes, fabulous. People are responding. Wonderful. It's always nice when technology works. Fabulous. So I can see I've got 2 of you already that have popped some things in. Brilliant. There's 4 of you now. Wonderful. People, I like that. Management, brilliant. Wonderful. So I've got 6 of you there, another couple of responses, and then we will continue on. Wonderful. Someone who's just put IT systems, you're giving me flashbacks to May 2017. But yes, absolutely, IT systems, huge. Scheduling, absolutely, behind the scenes, communications, wonderful. Smooth, I like that. Smooth is good. Just another 30 seconds, because I know there can be a little bit of a delay with these systems as well. Brilliant. So we've got 19 responses, which is fantastic. I'm going to leave this running throughout, so please don't worry too much if you haven't put that in yet. But what we'll do is I'll pop this into the slides afterwards, and I'll get the guys to send the slides out afterwards if you've got any further questions. Hope that's all right, girls. But yeah, let's keep going. So a lot of the discussions I can see here around management, behind the scenes, what's happening behind the scenes, what is the business in the first place, what is there around scheduling and operations. This is making me very, very happy and is exactly what we're going to be covering today. So I'm just going to stop sharing very briefly and pop the slides back up, and we will keep going. This is where I am still a little bit of a dinosaur when it comes to technology. So this evening, it seems like you've covered off really well what we're going to be looking at. So we're going to be looking at what aviation management is as a discipline, as an academic discipline. We're going to think about how we actually got here in the first place. So a little bit of background about the industry to date and kind of what's happened with the industry to date. I'm going to take you a little bit through the idea of governance and who actually manages us in the first place. We're going to look at a bit of around the structure of commercial aviation. Look at some kind of trends that are going on at the moment and what the actual future of the industry looks like as well. So hopefully in the next kind of 35-40 minutes, we're going to go through this really well. Now, I will be honest with you all. When I first got the job title of lecturer in aviation management, my first thing was to literally go onto Wikipedia and see what is aviation management. I knew that I had this role and I knew that I had experience in the aviation industry and I knew my patch of the industry. So for me, it was I knew cabin crew. I knew how to check somebody in. I knew what it was like to fly as a passenger. And I knew a little bit about kind of the operational side, the operation that I'd seen in the first place. But I didn't know a lot apart from that. And so I went straight in. What do I need to know? What do I need to research? What do I actually need to see? And what I'm going to be going through with you all is what I call kind of the introduction to aviation management. when I get my first year students, my lovely, keen first year students, when they walk in the door, when they're going to walk in the door next month, in September, and I'm going to get them on, they're all going to be fresh faced and really excited. This is the sorts of things I'm going to teach them about the industry, because there are people with a passion, and that all of you that are in this room right now, you obviously love aviation, you love to be a part of it one way or another, or you're inspired to be a part of it going forward. And this is really the cementing ground as to, right, this is how the industry runs, and let's take it a little bit further. Come on, slide. So aviation management, and I'm going to go in with quite an odd definition. I know 2005, it is what, 19 years ago now, so it is a bit of an older definition. However, I really feel that this encompasses everything that we're trying to achieve within the industry. Now, you can break down the two words aviation management, and you can look at it as those two individual defining factors, but ultimately it's the study of business with the application to the aviation industry. So it's looking at the general business processes, looking at objectives, and looking how they apply to the aviation industry. Now, most people that study quite a general set of business in whatever discipline that they want to look at, they will look at operations management, they will look at supply chain management, they will look at human resources management, and they will look at the future strategies of businesses. We're just putting a twist on it, and we're just saying how all of these apply to the aviation industry. And we're looking at how the aviation industry runs, how the operation of aviation runs, how aviation businesses are looking forward. Can they look forward? If they can't look forward, what can they do to try and mitigate any potential crises going forward? Ultimately, it's about the safe and efficient operation of airlines, of airports, and all related industries. Now, in a second, we're going to go through a few things, but what we're talking about here is how air traffic control is helping these businesses to run, how maintenance and repair organisations are helping to keep planes in the air in the first place, and ensuring that aircraft are flying the schedule that they're supposed to fly as much as they can. Talking about financing, so I've had the pleasure over the last few months talking to solicitors and talking to people that work in accountancy firms about how aircraft are financed in the first place, how the industry is financed in the first place. It's really difficult to get into the aviation industry. You need a hell of a lot of money just to be able to start an airline or an airport. And so you need that financing to assist you to go forward. We're talking about compliance. We've seen only this week, there's been quite a sad incident happen globally in Brazil with an aircraft crashing. We are talking about a very dangerous industry sometimes. Luckily, I've got more likelihood of being hit by a car tomorrow when I leave to go to work than I do when I jump on board an aircraft, but it's something that we always have to be considering, and we have to think about the compliance around this. I saw a few people in the Mentimeter had mentioned around managing people as well. My previous business that I used to work for at BA, we had 40-something thousand employees, and trying to manage 40,000 people in one business is a lot. You multiply that across the different airlines, the different airports, the different supply chain manufacturers, and everybody that is involved in the aviation supply chain. And actually, we've got a hell of a lot of people that we're trying to work with all of a sudden that are compliant, that are respecting ATC, that are understanding the rules of airlines and airports and all of the other safety compliances around as well. But there's something else that I wanted to bring forward, and especially with what we're trying to discuss here, I just think it's incredibly important. As we stand here in August 2024, 25% of senior roles in the aviation industry, so that is managers and higher, are filled by females. So 25% of these senior roles are filled by females. There are only 3% of aviation CEOs that are female, and both of these are taken from a Skift article that was produced about a month ago. This lady on screen right now, for those of you that aren't aware, this is Lynn Embleton, and Lynn Embleton is one of the only female CEOs that we have in the aviation industry at the moment. She is the CEO of Aer Lingus. She took over a few years ago, and to my knowledge, she's one of the only European airlines that are led by a female to begin with. Although the differences aren't as stark as in other areas of our industry, looking at engineering, looking at pilots, I know the percentages are significantly smaller in those areas, but it's very interesting to see that still less than 50% of the aviation workforce is female, and these numbers really reflect that as well. I've got to be a lecturer for a second, as well as wanting to inform you all. I've got to get a bit of research in there, and I've got to get a bit of discussions around academic disciplines as well. Now, I sit in an office where I've got pure aviation lecturers like me, who believe aviation to be at the centre of a lot of things. But I also sit in an office as well where I have hospitality lecturers and tourism lecturers. And we have this debate frequently as to where does aviation sit as an academic discipline, and actually who does aviation support. Now, the degree that I teach on came as a result of a tourism programme. So therefore, a lot of institutions, they believe aviation is a part of tourism. It's getting people around the world, and it's getting the things that people need to travel around the world there as well. Now, what on earth are you saying here? What am I trying to say here? Now, ultimately, when we look at aviation and we look particularly upper wing, and we're talking about commercial aviation, and we're talking about people being on board that aircraft, absolutely, it can be a part of tourism. It could be leisure tourism, so you're going on holiday or you're visiting friends and relatives. I've got a brother that lives a few thousand miles away, so I'm constantly on planes to go and see him, and him back here to the UK as well. And that's definitely a form of tourism. Going for business meetings. I've had some fantastic business meetings around the world. I think I was just saying to the guys beforehand, I'm actually teaching in Hong Kong next week. So that is a form of tourism. I'm doing business tourism over to Hong Kong to go and teach. So that's where it sits as kind of part of tourism, and definitely moving people around, but also moving the goods to supply a lot of this tourism as well. If you think about some of these beautiful, incredible remote places, think about places like the Maldives, the Seychelles, that come straight off the top of my head. In order for those places to survive and to support tourism there in the first place, they need the goods to be there as well. Think about food, think about supplies, and they have to be flown there. So that's where aviation also fits within the realm of tourism. But if I'm being honest, I'll agree with some people when they say, oh yeah, it's part of tourism. However, aviation as a discipline, it's part of business and logistics. It's getting people and things around the world. It's definitely a logistics area. It's making sure that we're getting things from A to B as quickly, as safely, and as efficiently as possible. Now, I'm sure many of you in the room right now, you may have had some lovely fresh fruit and fresh vegetables today. We're very fortunate at the moment that it's a good season for that. But I can tell you for a fact that the banana I had for breakfast this morning, that didn't come from the UK. And I can tell you that that was flown here overnight from somewhere that bananas will easily grow. And that's part of the logistics side of this. Think about if you've ordered something on a next day delivery, the likelihood is that may have flown even from a different airport within the country that you live in. That item has most likely flown domestically at least 30 to 45 minutes to get to where you are right now. It's the way that companies such as Amazon work. They will keep things in certain pockets around the country, and then overnight, this whole element of movement will happen, and around the world, things will be moving to get things to people as quickly as possible. So that's why I'm saying part tourism, part logistics, mostly logistics, especially if you're talking about cargo and people. And it's definitely about getting things there as quickly and as safely as possible. But what we need to remember, and the whole thing around aviation management and why we need this discipline in the first place, prior to the pandemic, we don't have the up-to-date figures at the moment. I've been trying to get them. I've been pestering my contacts at different data agencies over the last few days, and they haven't been able to pull anything for me yet. But at the start of 2020, 87.7 million jobs were supporting the aviation industry prior to the pandemic globally. That is a lot of people. I think it works out at 1% of the world. Please, can someone, if anyone wants to correct my maths, please do. But it works out that about 1% of the world's population works either within aviation or within a business that is supporting aviation. So whether that's transport and logistics for things to go on aircraft, or selling things as well that have flown on aircraft in the first place. And considering the impact of tourism with that as well. So a lot of people spend a lot of time within the world of aviation working, and that's without the people that are incredibly passionate. When you include those into it, the numbers spiral even higher. So that's kind of the discussion about what the industry is in the first place and where we're sitting, why is it an academic discipline, and why is it that we want to study. Please remember, if you have got any questions, please pop them down so that we can have a look at them as well. If there is anything around the Q&A or anything as well, please do just pop those in the chat at any point. So we need to think a little bit about how did we get here. Now, we are sitting in 2024 now, and if you think we've only really been flying for just over 100 years one way or another, humans that is, so we've been flying for about 100 years, there or thereabouts. So we need to think about how did we get here. Now, I'll be honest with you all, I normally do this in a 2-hour lecture on my dynamic aviation module. So I've tried to slim a 2-hour lecture into one slide. So we're going to see how we get on. Ultimately, aviation, people have wanted to fly for a very long time, and aviation has come as a result of that. We need to think about as well the advancements of aviation. A lot of that has got to do with what's been going on in the world at the time and how things have grown accordingly. So think about things that have caused jet engines to move on, think about pressurization and things as well. A lot of those have evolved the aviation industry to where we are now. It's come an awful long way from the planes of the first planes that were invented, and we are in such a place now that we've needed management because there is so many things going on at the time. So what do we need to think about here? Greater technology, the industry has grown, as it should do. As with a lot of these things, the greater the amount of technology involved, the more change we need to make things better for people. We've got larger aircraft. If you think the number of people that we were able to get on an aircraft kind of 70 years ago versus what we can get, the number of people we can get on an aircraft now, is two very, very different things. We've got some aircraft flying around the world with over 600 passengers on board. I'm flying on one of those with Emirates next week, so it's going to be interesting, let's put it that way. But we've got very, very large aircraft going on there, and it's definitely changed the way people are flying. There's been the implementation of greater and more accurate technologies as well. I've seen a big change in the past 10 years since we had the Malaysia Airlines incident to where we are now. Beforehand, tracking of aircraft wasn't particularly accurate versus where we are now, incredibly accurate tracking. And if aircraft aren't being tracked, a lot is being done as a result. There is more management structures in place so that we don't lose any aircraft and things like that. We also need to consider the deregulation of the industry as well. So for those of you that aren't aware, up until the 1970s, governments pretty much ran the aviation industries. They ran the airlines, they ran the airports. What happened, starting in the United States, moved to Europe, moved to Southeast Asia, and is now spreading from those three hubs. We had something called deregulation. So beforehand, very, very tight government controlled pricing of aircraft, government controlled pricing of tickets, government controlled route planning and route networks, made flying very, very expensive. This trend started out with the invention of airlines such as Southwest in the United States. And as I say, moving across Europe and Southeast Asia, and now ballooning around the world. Deregulation has allowed there to be more routes. So we've been able to fly to more places than we ever have before. Look at the Ryanair model with the sheer number of routes that they have, with the sheer number of aircraft they have. Consider as well the idea of being able to fly point to point and not necessarily having to have aircraft that are doing 6 or 7 different flights under the one flight number to be able to get from point A to point B. Deregulation has been fantastic as well, because we've been able to build more airports and more people have been able to be employed in the industry as well. It's made flying significantly easier for those of us that like to be tourists. Count me in that, most definitely. It has allowed for us to expand the industry in the place where it is now, where we're having to kind of catch up a little bit. We have allowed for all of these flights to happen, but now we're in a stage where some of the technology may not be necessarily where we want it to be. Therefore, we have things such as delays going on as a result of this. We've also got the idea as well now that we have around about 1,400 new aircraft being delivered annually. This was from the particular dates for this was the 1st of August 2023 to the 31st of July 2024. I pulled this from Cirium earlier just so we have the most accurate, up-to-date details. 1,400 new aircraft were delivered last year. And I can tell you for a fact that 1,400 aircraft were not retired. We are creating more aircraft, we're building more aircraft. We're not retiring as many aircraft as quickly as we potentially could be. So therefore, we've got more planes flying. Now, don't get me wrong, some of the older aircraft that need to be retired are absolutely being retired, but some of them, they are being converted to be used as freighters and get more cargo around the world and have this industry keep evolving, keep moving, and getting to a place now where we can see here Singapore Airlines receiving the 10,000th ever Airbus that has been manufactured a few years ago. So we've definitely come a long way. It has definitely moved on. We've definitely had quite a few things change as a result. So what we're going to have a look at now is we're going to look at the kind of wider industry, where things fit in, and see kind of where we're heading at the moment. Really like this picture. Sorry, I'm one of these nerds that kind of likes to put pictures in for a particular reason at some point. The reason that I've just shown you here is just showing that actually, although aviation will be solving a lot of things, we're still going to get a lot of things shipped around the world in the traditional shipping way with cargo, etc. So we need to think about the business structure of the aviation industry, and we need to see what's going on. Oh, good question, Maddie. I will come back to that in a second, and we'll get that answered. So, because there's a bit on here that I definitely want to cover with this. So within the aviation industry, we have a number of different pillars that sit in place. So we have got the airlines, as I say, the airports, and a lot of supporting groups of people that assist with this. So within your airport, you've got your ground handling services, you've got things around passenger handling, baggage handling, and the ramp. But then within the airport as well, you've got all of the infrastructure that's needed to keep that airport going. You've got firefighters to ensure that you've got the safe operation, and that this is at airports all around the world, from the very small to the very large. You've got things around the coordination of these airports as well. So who's going to be parking there at what point? You've got people there that are maintaining the airports as well. And I'm not just on about kind of cleaning the airports and things, building new runways and refreshing the runways, making sure that everything is good to go for the operation every single day. We've got all of our cargo movements as well. So we've got a lot of people there that are looking at the supply chain, be that the supply chain of absolutely anything, and moving pieces around the world as a result. I'm sure many of you that have flown before, especially if you've flown commercially, you're going to want to make sure that you've got some food on board and things like that. And we've got this whole catering aspect, which takes up such a big part of aviation space and is there to help make passenger comfort a significantly easier thing to do. So they're there making sure that everything that you want on board an aircraft is actually going to be there in the first place. We've got our maintenance and repair. Your maintenance and repair is there to ensure that your aircraft are safe in the first place. And that's all from starting and building a new aircraft all the way through to maintaining these aircraft dailies and weekly, etc. You've got your flight operations as well, which I'm sure many of you on this call right now are particularly interested in. So that's actually flying these aircraft and getting them around the world in the first place. And this is where I have to put in the caveat that you could be like me, I probably will never have the opportunity to fly just due to health conditions. However, I was able to be in flight planning and I was working with the pilots every single day and making sure that their routes were correct and making sure that their takeoff performance was going to be correct in the first place. And there are so many important things to be involved in that flight operation in the first place. Your air traffic controllers, your trainers, not as in like your running shoes, as in the people that are training you in the first place, looking at fuel and fueling of these aircraft as well. There's marketing. I can't walk anywhere at the moment without being bombarded by advertisements of flights. You can tell I need a holiday. It's all I'm being served at the moment is you should fly here, you should fly there, but also looking at the customer experience as well and marketing the customer experience in the first place. Now, Maddie, this one's for you. So we're talking here about fleet and revenue. So it's a bit of a chicken and an egg situation in terms of being able to afford an aircraft in the first place. The last time I was checking and was speaking to some of the team over at Ryanair, they were doing some massive deals with Boeing to get some aircraft for particularly cheap. I can't tell you the exact figure because I've been sworn to secrecy, but they were spending less than 2/3 of the list price for 737s at the moment. Aircraft are expensive. Aircraft can range anywhere when it comes to commercial aviation from about 40 million up to about $350 million. So aircraft are all purchased in dollars. Doesn't matter what the manufacturer is. Aircraft are all purchased in dollars. A lot of the aviation industry works in dollars, and there is two ways of doing this. Number one, you can purchase an aircraft with a rather large checkbook in the first place and say, yes, I would like to buy a plane. Now, the caveat with this is the more planes you buy, the cheaper they are. It's a bit like wholesaling. The more aircraft you purchase, the cheaper you're going to get them per unit. It's a bit of a deal that gets done. But most of the time, airlines that are starting out, they can't afford to just be like, here is $200 million. Can I please buy a plane, Mr. Boeing or Mr. Airbus or Ms. Embraer or Ms. ATR, etc. They don't have the ability to do that. They don't have the finances to do that. So instead, they will lease aircraft. There are specific businesses that exist globally where you can lease an aircraft. I'm sure many of you have probably heard about leasing cars. It's kind of done in a similar sort of fashion. So you can have enough, you build up some trust with a bank or with a lending agent, and you can lease an aircraft from a leasing company who have bought an aircraft. They have got billions in the bank, and you can lease it off them and pay a certain amount each month. This can take time, and I've seen some airlines that are starting out at the moment, and it's fantastic. They're leasing some fabulous aircraft at the moment. There's one that's leasing an A380 at the moment, and they've done that through sheer will and determination to be able to lease this aircraft in the first place, to get it up in the skies. So a lot of them start out leasing, and then they'll move to potentially buying them afterwards. There are some airlines that solely lease their aircraft because they will want new aircraft every 6 to 7 years. So rather than purchase an aircraft outright and lose the revenue on it, they would rather pay every month the business to rent the plane, basically. And they will rent this aircraft, they will lease this aircraft, and then they will have the pilots to fly it. You'll then get businesses sometimes that will maybe not want to do it in those ways. They will want to own their aircraft outright. Ryanair are a big advocate of owning their aircraft outright, so they go and purchase them all afterwards. And then when those aircraft are seen to not be as profitable as they may have been in the first place, they will either sell them on to somebody that wants the aircraft. There are a number of countries that are developing that want to purchase new aircraft, that want to purchase aircraft but can't afford to purchase a new one, so they will purchase, say, a 15-year-old aircraft, or they will sell those aircraft to people that will break the aircraft down, and then they'll sell the parts on. Once they've sold those parts on, they can purchase a new aircraft. It's a constantly evolving cycle. Brilliant question, Maddie. Thank you so much. So why do we need management? What is it that we've got going on there at the moment? We've got 40,000 airports globally. That's a lot of people to manage. And that is a lot of places to manage as well. So we've got over 40,000 airports globally. They have to follow the ICAO regulations as to how they're built and how they are regulated. And that is a safety compliance piece. Now, we've also got 24,000 active registered aircraft. This is commercial aircraft only. This is the figure that Statista is putting out at the moment, but that is an awful lot of aircraft that could be flying at any one go. What we need to remember as well is these 24,000 active registered aircraft, they're going to be flying a lot. They're not just going to fly once per day. They're potentially going to fly between 6 and 8 times per day as a minimum, and therefore lots of flights are happening as a result, which is how we get to some of these figures slightly further down. To this date, so until midnight Zulu of kind of today, there have been over 22 million flights this year alone. That's why we need to manage these things. That's why we need people managing the operation, looking and seeing how it's going about smoothly, and making sure that everything is happening in such a way. Now, don't get me wrong, I've been on 2 cancelled flights this year. I've been at the airport waiting, and 2 of my flights have been cancelled, but still over 22 million of them have gone absolutely fine, and they've been fantastic. So we need to think, actually, not that many are being cancelled, not that many are being delayed. Most flights are flying successfully globally every single day. Just to have a little bit of a look and take some cargo aspects there as well. Almost 60 million metric tons of cargo were flown in 2023. That is down from the pandemic. In the pandemic, we were looking at about 63 to 64 million tons of cargo that were flown in the pandemic years, trying to get things such as equipment around the world as well. But we've got a lot of cargo going around the world. If you think you've got anywhere between about 5 and you could have about kind of 50 tons of cargo, something like that on board a flight, that's when you really start to see where these statistics are coming from. And actually, I'm quite sad that the busiest day in aviation hasn't actually been this year. It was last year. So last year, 6th of July, I think it was a Thursday, there was 134,000 flights recorded in 24 hours. So if you think 134,000 flights, we're going to need regulation. We're going to need management. We're going to need people in operation centres actually making sure that these flights go to plan in the first place, that they're planned correctly, that they are safe, and that the operation stays as is, and that there is very little minimal disruption as possible. So this is why we need management. The numbers are exponentially going up and up and up, as you can see. And what we've also got here as well is just on the left-hand screen, we can see where kind of passenger movements have been as well. It also does show you the significant drop that we saw during the pandemic as well, and just what we're trying to recover as well. So we need to have a little bit of a look and see what's kind of happening at the moment. What are we actually, as an academic discipline, what are we focusing on, and what I want some of you guys potentially to be having a look at going forward as well, because these are the challenges for the here and now. So these are kind of 4 things. This is what I said to the office last week when I was in. What are the 4 biggest issues do you see in the industry at the moment? And this is what they came back with. Now, the sustainability expert in the team, he said we need to be looking at sustainability and green aviation. I wholeheartedly agree. 2.5% of the world's global emissions are currently credited to the aviation industry alone, and they are not counted within the EU. With the EU, the global emissions standards either. Brilliant question there as well. So we need to consider what's happening with sustainability, looking at new fuels, looking at new aircraft types in the first place. I've just supervised a dissertation with someone looking at the new aircraft that are looking to be coming in, and some of them aren't potentially going to fit the scale that we want them to at the moment. So big challenge there. Secondly, we've got the issue around technology and innovation. this is kind of some of the areas that I personally look at is around technology and innovation. UAVs are not a new invention. I need to put that out there right now. So unmanned aerial vehicles are most definitely not a new invention. They've been around for about 70 years and they're rewriting how the industry works. We need manned and unmanned aviation to work in harmony with each other. We need to make sure that they are on the same page and that everyone is respecting the same rules and ensuring that they're working in harmony with each other, because ultimately we've seen what's happened when unmanned vehicles or unmanned flights don't particularly follow the rules that they necessarily need to, and there's a level of respect there that we need to have within the aviation industry of sharing an airspace. A bit like how cyclists and cars are able to share a road together by following the same rules, we need to be following the same rules. So definitely looking at a piece around that at the moment. Very fortunately, one of the previous aviation ambassadors was working for West Midlands Police, and we were doing a bit of work with him before his tenure ran out, around how we can work with people like the police using drones every day and seeing how we can work together and not be seen as an enemy towards each other. Actually, manned flights and unmanned flights definitely need to work together, providing there is a set of rules there for everyone. Also looking at AI as well within the industry. Very interestingly, if you ever use a chatbot for an airline or anything at the moment, it is all based off AI, and then you'll be put through to a person eventually. But sometimes those AI systems don't have the most human presenting in the first place. But therefore, they need to make sure that they're working together so that passenger experience is better, and also for the experience for those using cargo services as well. We've also got a number of economic challenges. This is another one of the other girls in the office. She was mentioning, yep, we've still got supply chain issues. We work closely with a number of suppliers in the West Midlands, and they're still saying that their supply chain to manufacture parts to then send them on into the aviation manufacturer supply chain, there is still a delay, and we're talking 4.5 years post the start of the pandemic. We are still seeing economic challenges from that. But there's also new technologies that are being implemented as well that have caused a number of economic challenges. One being around safety and security, which is what this image is, and kind of to do with the next piece as well. We've had a mass change in our security systems across the UK and the EU when it comes to screening of luggage, people, and cargo in the past few years. We've now gone to X-ray scanners. All of those needed to be implemented by the 1st of June. Some of those haven't been seen as successfully as they should have done. They've cost a lot of money and they're causing a lot of disruption at the moment. Safety and security is still our #1 priority within the industry, and that is definitely something that we need to be considering moving forward. That all of these things, I will tell you now, I'm setting these as assessments for my students this upcoming year. I'm asking them to answer questions on all 4 of these areas, because ultimately these are the challenges that need answering now, but we've got some challenges that are coming forward as well. We can't predict the future. I can't be Mystic Meg with my orb here, with my looking into the future and seeing what's going on. I can't tell you what's happening, but ultimately we know that there's a few things that are happening. We've got emerging technologies. Supersonic is back on the cards. I'm incredibly excited about it. If slightly apprehensive about it, I don't know if anyone can see, I've actually got a massive Concorde there. I've got a big thing about supersonic aircraft, but it's really exciting that it's back on the cards again, and that this is something going forward. We want to make sure that flights are as fast as possible whilst being as efficient as possible in terms of sustainability. UAV is also providing mobility as well. I was fortunate enough to go to the Coventry Expo a couple of years ago, talking about drone deliveries and looking at drone mobility going forward and people flying using unmanned aircraft. Let's get the unmanned vehicle, the cars done first, and then I'm thinking we should probably look at the same sort of mobility when it comes to aviation, although I have thoughts about that definitely for a different day. We need to think about regulatory and environmental changes as well. We are looking that there's going to be harsher caps that are going to be set by the United Nations going forward in terms of emissions and emissions from the industry being counted. So Decisions need to be made now, and changes need to be made now so that companies aren't going to be affected going forward. I know a lot of things have changed in the 5 years since I left the Absolute Solid operation in the first place. I was told very much get people here as quickly as possible, but put as much fuel on as we need, burn as much fuel as we need to, so that we don't have to worry about other things such as paying compensation. That is not the case anymore. We shouldn't be loading up aircraft with loads of fuel, because ultimately we will be hit with emissions charges going forward. Ultimately, changes in practices need to be made now, because if we're making changes to our practice now, when harsher targets are set, we can actually make a difference going forward. We also need to think about market growth and globalization as well. We need to think about the fact that there are a number of markets that are fairly saturated. I've talked about North America, I've talked about Europe, and I've spoken about Southeast Asia. There are a lot of places on Earth, though, that should be afforded the ability to grow their aviation industries. South America is definitely growing as an aviation industry, but it is very far behind the big three kind of areas in the world. And Africa only has a 5% share of the entire market within aviation. These are places that focus should be put, development should be put, so that these industries can grow and be part of this massive global aviation industry. Ultimately, we need to be looking at seeing how we can support these markets to grow their infrastructure, to make things better. Just one quick example about this: if you want to fly to the majority of sub-Saharan Africa from Europe, you will either have to fly to Ethiopia, Kenya, or South Africa, and then fly back again to wherever it is in sub-Saharan Africa that you want to visit. There are very, very few flights that connect a lot of Central Africa to the rest of the world. These continents need to be afforded the same privilege, the same allowance as the rest of the world. This is something that myself and my colleagues are incredibly passionate about. One of my colleagues is a very esteemed member of AviaDev, which work in terms of building the growth of these places around the world. And I'm by no means an expert in talking about the globalization and market growth, but what I can tell you is these things matter. So I can see the time. So just a couple of things I want to mention, and then if anyone wants to start popping some questions into the chat for me to answer, I am coming to wrap up now. So if you want to, if you wish to know more, if I've managed to excite you, I'm just going to do a very cheesy plug here for 2 seconds. So we've got a number of different courses at University College Birmingham. I teach everything from the level 2 cabin crew all the way to the BA-ons at the moment. So the level 2, the level 3, the foundation degree, and the bachelor's degree I teach at the moment. And we are also we also have a fantastic master's degree that I'll be teaching on next year, which is slightly terrifying. Looking forward to doing the supervision for the dissertations for that. And we're also introducing an executive MBA as well, where you can have an aviation focus. We've got a number of members on the aviation team sitting with that. So that's kind of it from me. If you have got any further questions and things, please send me an email. My email address is on the screen. If you want to follow me on Instagram, if you just would rather slide into the DMs and do it that way, that's absolutely fine. Or you can find me on LinkedIn as well. I'm under Katie Bickley on LinkedIn. You can see that Liz has just popped a question in the chat. So Liz is asking about what's going to be the next big challenge growing unmanned aviation, regulations or integration, public awareness or something else. From what we're seeing at the moment, from the discussions I've been having around this, it's definitely regulation and public awareness. Once we get that into place and we have a slight bit more infrastructure around drone implementation, especially around the purchase of drones and then the usage of drones and UAVs, I definitely think that will be kind of the next big challenge. That's my personal opinion. But yeah, really good. So how close are we to, so yeah, thank you for that, Liz. You can tell I'm not used to answering the questions in the chat. So how close are we to widely used sustainable aviation fuel? Really good question there, Catherine. So in terms of sustainable fuel usage, it depends on the airports. It's the airport usage which is the largest issue that we have at the moment. There are a number of airports, particularly across Scandinavia, that have been fantastic and really have begun to move over to the usage of sustainable aviation fuel. but what we're looking at here is around about 5% of those flights being able to use sustainable aviation fuel. Now, sustainable aviation fuel, it costs more, so some airlines are slightly hesitant to use SAF as a fuel for their aircraft in the first place. But I think the more that airlines are beginning to use it and are beginning to show their customers, be that cargo customers or other or passengers, etc., the more that they are beginning to incentivize the use of sustainable fuel and the offsetting of the fuel costs as well, I think the wider it will become. If you think it was only last November, so 9 months ago, that we had our first transatlantic sustainable aviation fueled aircraft with Virgin Atlantic, which is obviously one of the Elevate Her partners now. We only saw that in November, so it's a long way off widely used sustainable aviation fuel yet. But I believe the more airports that are implementing it, especially the larger hub airports, if we think about these big airports globally, the quicker they are to adopt the use of sustainable aviation fuel and to get their airline partners on board, I think the quicker that we will get it there, especially on the commercial scale. Now, I talk a lot about the commercial level simply because that is the significantly most amount of flights that are happening each day are happening in the commercial sphere, and they're the ones that are burning the most fuel. So if we can try and get as many of those users across as possible, the better it will be. As I say, it is an incentivization piece. There are airlines that like Virgin Atlantic that are really kind of pushing this agenda forward. I know BA are doing their thing as well. You've got airlines like KLM that are really developing and making waves in terms of having more of their aircraft able to have sustainable fuel in the first place, and looking at researching into new aircraft types in the first place. The more commercial aviation that is doing this, I think the better it's going to be. We are still a long way off, I will be honest. I'd like to say that in the next 10 years we're seeing a lot more of it, but it's really only been the last kind of 7 years that we've started to see sustainable aviation fuels be used in the first place. And the adoption rates that we're seeing, it depends airline by airline, but ultimately some airlines are doing it better than others, and some have got some fantastic corporate sustainability plans, others maybe not so much. Have we got any final questions in the chat? And thanks again for that, Catherine. Have we got any final questions? Someone's got their hand up. Or did have their hand up? This is giving me pandemic flashbacks. Any other questions, guys? Cool. I think that's about it, Catherine.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Honestly, that was absolutely fascinating. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would honestly want to talk to you more on all of those topics. That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you so much for taking your time to do this evening. And, you're such an expert in the field, and you have so much knowledge, and it's so valuable for all of us to look at, and to look at aviation on such a wider scale as well. I know we've talked about this a little bit, but I think we all get stuck into maybe and speaking personally here, get stuck into our own little bit of aviation, and we don't have a real appreciation for how big it is as an industry. So thank you so much for that. That was absolutely brilliant. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. So hopefully we'll be doing a lot more webinars as well. So do keep a lookout. And yeah, if you've got any feedback, anything that you'd like to see going forward, please, as always, let me know. Let us know on our email. It's hello@elevateheraviation.co.uk. Always just drop us a line. But yeah, I think we're pretty good. But thank you so much. That was brilliant.
Thank you, and thank you to Catherine, and thank you to Maddie as well.